Hello and welcome to the Soul Tribes. We are here twinning both as holistic healers, psychic mediums, and life coaches. Our goal is to normalize spirituality and create a conscious community. I am Amy Dascola.
And I'm Dara Jewet.
And we are the Soul Tribes. And today we are vibing out with the amazing philanthropist Ted Bunch. And we are just going to let him right in so you can meet Ted.
Hello.
Hi, Ted. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Amy. Hello, Dara.
Hi, how are you, Ted? We're so glad to have you.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, I just am so honored and excited to introduce you all to someone who is not only a role model for me and many other people, but has been a dear friend to me for the past 10 years. And I want to say thank you to you, Ted, on air, because you have been extremely instrumental in my healing process. So not only is he the Chief Development Officer at A Call to Men, but he is internationally recognized for his efforts to help prevent violence against women while promoting a healthy, respectful manhood. And that's something that I think needs to be spoken about a lot more is what is the definition of manhood? He's a leading voice on male socialization, an intersection of masculinity and violence against women, and healthy, respectful manhood, which is, again, very important. He's the author of a book called The Book of Dares. It's 100 inspiring, creative, fun challenges for boys. And this is basically a direct answer for parents' cries for building healthy masculinity, respect, and emotional literacy in their sons. So he's a co-author of this amazing book that just came out. He also co-authored another workbook for A Call to Men with Tony Porter. That's basically a fundamental on how men can go about creating this healthy manhood. He's also an educator, an activist, a professor. He does lecturing. He's a trainer for the NBA. He's also trained with the NFL, the NHL, the MLS, the MLB, and also something very close to my heart that always really made me see him as someone who's an advocate on a global level is he actually has presented for the UN and was appointed as a committee member to Unite. And so if anyone doesn't know what Unite is, it's an international network of male leaders working to end violence against women on a global level. So for me, I actually have always been a huge fan of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who is the first woman Liberian president, the first woman African president. And she has done more for women's rights. And she actually is a global peace holder. And I can't remember what year she won that in TED, maybe you do, but she has done more for women's rights than any other president ever. And Ted and Tony Porter with A Call to Men have actually worked very closely with her to help end violence against women in Africa as well. So it's not just here in the United States, they're working all over. They've developed and implemented model response programs for police, fire departments, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, other first responders. And he's also a frequent guest on the Today Show and NPR and other great networks. So for us to have someone like Ted on our podcast is so remarkable because he is walking the walk, talking the talk. And Ted, thank you from the bottom of my soul for being here and honoring us with your presence.
Thank you so much, Dara, for that wonderful introduction and for your support over the years. And hello, Amy. Thank you both for using your platform to elevate the work of A Call to Men. And I will say, Dara, that I think we've known each other. I think it might be more than 10 years, actually. I remember back in 2008, when we first met, and you volunteered for the organization for a bit. And ever since then, you've been building a wonderful brand. And I appreciate this new platform you have with your podcast. I wish you all the best, and I'm honored to be on it. So thank you.
Absolutely. So today, we're really talking about the modality of abuse and really reprogramming the mindset, not just the male mindset, but society's mindset of masculinity, and to be able to step out of the man box. And so basically, just briefly, we'll kind of talk about the different forms of abuse. There's sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional or verbal abuse, mental, psychological abuse or neglect, financial, economic abuse, and also cultural or identity abuse. But really what we want to focus on is the man box, because this is a term that A Call to Men has actually coined. And it's something that when I first met him, basically I met Ted because a mutual friend of mine told me about this guy who started this nonprofit that was working to help end domestic violence against women. And I volunteered my whole life with other organizations. Well, I shouldn't say my whole life, but since my early 20s, helping women that have already been abused to restart their lives again, to help their children get into safe houses and the women get into safe houses and be able to figure out how to live again safely. And so I was working on the side of what happens after the abuse, which is the cleanup. What Ted is doing is he's starting on the preventative side. So the man box is society's predisposed mentality, or basically that pressure that says man can only embrace certain emotions like anger, aggression, competition, but they have to deny other feelings like love and compassion and respect. Even the fact in the sports teams, the coach will tell the boy that he throws like a girl, and that little boy will literally want to die. All the other little boys will be pointing and screaming at him saying, you throw like a girl, you throw like a girl. And to those boys, that's the worst possible thing that they can be compared to, is a girl. Now, if we are teaching our young men that the worst possible thing that you can be compared to is a girl, then what are we teaching our young men about the value of women? And like this hit me so profoundly. And I was like, oh my God, I have to volunteer with him in any way, shape, or form I can, because he is literally planting the seeds for change. He's not just trying to clean it up. And the other thing is, this is a guy. And I was like, this is two men that actually are stepping out of the man box, not only to embrace all sides of themselves, every emotion of themselves, and to teach this to other people that, you know, this can be the new reality if we allow it to be. But basically, this man is just setting a platform. And so, Amy, please let us know how abuse or letting yourself get out of the mentality has affected you in your story.
So I felt it was very important. For many years, I was an educator and taught in some very tough schools and saw a lot of generations of abuse and of traumas that ensued within those schools. And it also, abuse has hit home personally for me in many points of my life. Ironically, Dara and I grew up together. So Dara and I have known each other since we were 12 years old. And the irony is, we met each other in a YMCA support group. And one of the reasons I was there was because of some childhood sexual abuse that I had endured. And then we also realized, fast forward to when we kind of reconnected in our 30s, that Dara and I had actually shared some of the same exact abusers when we were growing up. And so it has touched us on levels that, you know, for today's podcast, normally we're very upbeat, it's spiritual, it's easy, it's fun, you know, but we were like, you know, it's very important that we speak to our truths. because we are survivors of it. And not only are we survivors of it, but we're light workers. And so a lot of people see light workers as people that, you know, are up in the clouds, life is good, life is easy, this. But instead, we want to bring to the light that everyone can be a survivor of trauma. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter where you are in society. It has no bounds. So it's very important that we reprogram society into normalizing speaking on this, because this is not something that should just be hidden in like a Me Too kind of thing where you're like, oh God, that's awful. Yeah, me too. And then that's all it's spoken on. Instead, we have people like Ted who's creating a proactive approach so that women like us who have survived one trauma, multiple traumas, no longer have to sit back and say, I'm scared to speak my truth. I don't want to come out. I don't want my family to know. I don't want anyone to feel guilt. So there's a lot that is tough with that. And the problem is, if you don't face those shadows, they're going to continue to echo, right? So unfortunately, since I did address them when I was younger, but I continued to echo it in relationships. And, you know, I very much believe in the law of attraction. And so since I wasn't dealing with it, it kept attracting to me like a magnet. And all of a sudden I found myself in my 20s and I had been, you know, raped multiple times, had been in some very abusive, tumultuous relationships where I almost lost my life. And if we have people in this universe like Ted to speak on it, and instead to start, you know, as a teacher, I saw those young boys and I saw why they needed to be reached and how easy it was to reach them if you just taught them, because they are conscious and they are aware. So we just want to bring to light and to normalize that everyone has their something. It may not be a rape, it may not be an abuse, but everyone has endured some type of trauma. And we are just so blessed to have, as I said, people like Ted in the universe to speak on this and be a voice and be that light. So thank you, Ted.
Thank you. Thank you both very much for your courage to share your experience, because it makes such a difference with the audience. It impacts me, and I've, you know, hear women survivors for the last 25 years, and it still impacts me. So I appreciate your courage, and I'm sorry that those things happen to you. And that's what we're really trying to avoid. You know, the work of A Call to Men is, our vision is to create a world where all men and boys are loving and respectful, and all women, girls, and those in the margins of the margins are valued and safe. And we say the margins of the margins because we really want to think about who is it that we're not, who's the lost person in our community that we don't think about. We want to impact those people as well. So if I can just share, I want to respond to a number of things because you all have touched on so much. Let me just say from the beginning that in our country, well, not just our country, but pretty much everywhere, when we deal with the issues, social issues or other issues, we tend to deal with it from intervention. Something has to happen and we want to do something about it. Well, our work is to go upstream to where it never happens in the first place, prevention. And when we talk about violence against women, I want to make clear to your listening audience that this is not an indictment on manhood. It's actually an invitation to men. And it's not so much about calling men out. Yes, you're the bad guy. We're not interested in that. It's about calling men in. Because the thing is about this manhood that we've all been taught, born into, inherited, and we pass down to our youth, we call it the collective socialization of manhood, or the man box, which Dara mentioned earlier. And it's all things that we're taught. And while the overwhelming majority of violence against women is men's violence, the overwhelming majority of men are not violent, but we're silent about those that are. And that's as much of the problem as the violence is. So with A Call to Men, Tony Porter and I founded the organization 20 years ago. We decided, and we were both working with men with batterers. I ran the largest domestic violence program in the country in New York City. and he was also working with Men Who Batter. And with that work, it became clear that let's not speak to the minority of men, which is the smaller number of men, those who are abusive. Let's speak to all men, because those men who are abusive are taught the same things about women and girls and boys and men and gender nonconforming folks that all of us are taught the same thing. Those who are abused, those who do abusive things, and those who do not. And we've all been taught, like the example Dara gave, you throw like a girl. Everyone has heard something like that. Now, girls throw just fine, but everyone has heard something like that. Most of us have said something like that because that's the way we teach each other, especially men to men, men to boys, is we motivate each other at the expense of girls, at the expense of women. We also bond with each other at the expense of women, right? So when that woman walks down the street and all of us say something about how she looks, that's a bonding experience. And if one of us doesn't do that, he's punished for it by the others, right? So it's all connected. So in this man box, we're taught all the obvious things that you would think: be tough, don't ask for help, right? Make all the decisions, be in charge, dominate, don't express any emotion except for anger. And there's also 3 other things: that women and girls are seen as having less value than men and boys across the board. That's why we all know the answer to that question when we say, don't throw it harder, son, you throw like a, everyone knows the answer to that. Doesn't mean you believe it, but that's our socialization. We've been taught these things, whether we wanted to learn them or not. They're the messages that we receive around gender, around race, around class, around religion, all of these messages that are within our society. And we have our own, we have biases that are conscious and some that are unconscious. So as men, we're all taught that women and girls have less value than men and boys, that on some level, women are the property of men. That's why you're in Florida, I'm in New York, and anywhere in our United States, if I see a man right now in 2021 hitting his wife or girlfriend, and I walk over to him and I say, knock it off, he says, mind your business. Mm-hmm. Well, where did he learn that? We never had conversations about that. That's our collective socialization. He said, mind your business, she belongs to me. Actually, 3 women are killed every day in the United States, murdered from domestic violence, 3 a day. And out of those 3, 75% are killed once she decides to leave or has left. So the last 4 days, you have 12 women. 9 of them were killed because she says, I'm leaving, or he comes home, sees that she left, he goes and finds her and kills her. So what does that say about his belief system? If I can't have you, nobody can. That's ownership property, right? So sometimes we can judge a victim and say, why doesn't she just leave? She goes to work every day. Why doesn't she just keep going? Well, it's not that simple. He has all these constraints and all these controls. He's controlling it. By the way, women who have resources and money of their own that they have control of, because oftentimes he controls it, leave.
But also, it's so interesting why everyone always puts the blame back on the woman. Why doesn't she leave?
Right.
As if it's just up to her just to leave. Like It's just that easy.
Exactly.
If it was just that easy, don't you think she would?
Of course she would. And to your point, if women could end violence against them that men perpetrate, they would have already.
It's up to already.
Right. It's up to men to do that. If Black folks could end racism, they would have already.
Yeah.
For white folks to do that, right? So it's really the dominant group has the responsibility of making the changes, because the dominant group is the one doing the things and also benefiting from the things. So less value property. And then the third is objectification, that we're taught to objectify women, and we teach our boys that every day. I'll give you a quick example. A high school boy in your community, a good kid who's in your neighborhood, he's a junior or senior in high school, good kid, going out he's going to take a young woman out to the movie. She's also a high school. They go to the same high school. They're both juniors. This was before COVID, of course, or well, you're in Florida, so maybe movies are opening a little sooner.
There is no COVID here. What are you talking about? Everyone doesn't have masks on. Come on.
Okay, so it's before COVID, right? He's taking her to the movie, and he gets on a group text with a couple of his buddies, and this is their first time going out. his name's John, her name's Kathy, let's say. He gets on a group text with a couple of his buddies and says, hey, I'm taking Kathy out to the movies. I'll hit you guys up later, right? Follow me? So they give him a little crap for that, right? Taking Kathy to the movie, right? All that. So he takes her to the movie, takes her home. He's the perfect gentleman. He gets back on the group text and says, I'm back from the movie. And I'll ask you all, is the first thing that those boys ask him is, how was the movie?
No.
No. Well, so they're asking him things like, did you get any?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how was it? Meaning not the movie, her, right?
Correct.
So they're 17 years old. Where do they learn what questions they ask? And then if John has the courage to say, I'm just trying to see if I want to be a friend, I'm not trying to get anything, then they're going to punish him for that. What's wrong with you? You're this, you're that, you don't like this, you don't like that. So if the expectation, if young men spend time with a girl, a young woman, is that it's only about objectification. And if you're not about that, then there's something wrong with you. You're falling short on the manhood that we've taught them to live up to. So we teach men we teach our boys to objectify women and girls. That's why in the post-Me Too time, so many men were back on their heels. You know why? Because all of us have done it. There's not one man who I've ever met who hasn't either done something or said something or sexually objectified a woman or witnessed another man doing something and saying something and did nothing about it. And I know that to be true. I can feel confident in saying that because you don't get to go from boy to young adult to man without doing that. That's actually one of the tests that you have to pass in order to get your man card. Now, that's not to say that everybody does it, continue to do it, but all of us have. Would I want you to go back to my college years and say, well, how was Ted in college? Did he ever sexually objectify a woman when she walked by? And did he say anything when he was with his friends? Yeah, of course I did, because that's what you were taught to do. And if you didn't do it, right? So this wasn't something that you were just born in and then, you know, you're this perfect human being. I'm still growing from these things. And I'll just give you one more story and then I'll pass it back over to you, because Dara knows that once I start talking about this, I'm very passionate about it. But I want to tie it back.
That's why you're here.
That's why, yes.
I want to tie it back into the little girl, the boy throwing like a girl. So I've been doing this work for over 25 years. A Call to Men's founded 20 years ago, but I've been doing the work longer than that. My oldest son is 23 years old now. He was probably about 11, maybe 10 or 11 when this occurred. So I'm going out to do this work, promoting healthy manhood, eradicating sexism, ending violence against women, all of those things. I'm going out to do this work and I'm getting on a flight to go and do a presentation. And I probably did this 50 times before, where I would kiss everybody goodbye. But Joshua, my oldest son, this is important, my oldest son, and I'm going out of town on business. He's 10, 11 years old. So I'm going out of town on business. And like any great dad, right? When he's rolling my laptop bag out behind me, we get into the car, I say goodbye to everybody. I lean down, hug him, give him a kiss. And I say to him, like any other good dad would do, is, okay, son, now you
Be good.
be good. Take care of things around here. You're the man of the house. You got it, son? I got it, Dad. Amy, Dara, he ain't got shit. What does he have at 10 or 11 years old?
Nothing.
Nothing.
So, nothing. So it occurred to me in that moment that,
Is that,
go ahead.
I was going to say, she had it. She
That's
had
right.
everything taken care of.
That's right. And yes, go ahead, Dara, please.
But so you were not only instilling in him that he's got to be the man of the house, but that he actually is over his mother, because he's got to take care of his mother, and then the woman is actually underneath him.
Yes. And this is something, and I tell that story because we have to connect the dots for men who are listening about how it really is about us. I would never go and sexually assault somebody. I would never go and and do domestic violence.
He's
But
the kindest man, I can attest, honestly.
thank you. But the attitude, the behavior, the belief is the same, because I'm motivating him in that moment. Now, let me be clear, because there's some dads there who are getting upset who are listening to this right now. And just let me be clear that this is not an indictment on parenting. This is really looking at it from, we're teaching, as a father, we're teaching our sons important lessons. The lesson is be a protector, be accountable, be responsible. Those are wonderful lessons I want to teach my son. But it occurred to me in that moment that I'm teaching him that at the expense of his mother, in the same way we're teaching that boy to throw harder at the expense of girls. Because you're absolutely right, Dara. She's got it all the time. If I had men when I share this story with men and I ask them, I'll ask a man who's married to a woman, his name will be Mark. I'll say, okay, Mark, what's your wife's name? He'll say it's Kathy, right? Well, let's go with Karen, right? And I say, well, when you're out of the house, when you're away from home, does Karen got it? Does she take care of things? He says, oh yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, I also bet, Mark, that when you're home, she makes sure you got what you got to get. Isn't that right? And he's like, yep. So it's not that women are not capable. They're extremely capable. And we act like they're not. So in that moment, to your point, Dara, I'm actually taking the entitlement and privilege that's given to me by society. I haven't earned it now. That's given to me as a man. And even as a man of color, as a Black man, we have male privilege. Let me make that clear. So I'm taking what's given to me, that entitlement and privilege, and literally passing it down to him, saying that this is now your responsibility because I'm not going to be around. And that's how the man box plays.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too, just for everyone to really understand, because you actually said, this isn't an indictment probably like 3 times. And I really want everyone to know that everything he's saying is truly not telling you what you've been always doing is horrible and wrong and you're a horrible parent, because you were doing the best that you could with the knowledge that you knew, how you were programmed. What we're doing here is we're just giving you new information, something new to think about. And when you really think about it, I'm sure it will click with you so that you can begin to become the change that you want to see in this world. And that truly begins with a vocabulary, believe it or not. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, whoever knew, it actually begins with your vocabulary. But me personally, it's not too far stem, because of all the abuses that I've suffered. I believe that the emotional and psychological abuse is some of the worst abuse that I've ever endured, because that's the stuff that 20 years later keeps playing in your head. I mean, bruises heal, cuts heal. You get over that stuff, but it's the psychological stuff that can keep replaying. And I think the other important thing is that to mention the abuser themselves probably at one time experienced some kind of abuse or trauma that made them feel, like Ted was saying, I mean, it might not be to the extent that they're giving it, but to some extent, his boys were abusing him in a way to make him feel like he wasn't a man. And who knows, like some boys even beat up other boys if they don't respond in certain ways. So then it becomes physical abuse. And we don't talk about that as abuse, because no, that's just boys being boys. Boys beat up boys because that's just boys being boys. No, we don't have to just fly by with this being the status quo anymore. We can, it's 2021. We can choose to change this world. And the only way we're going to choose to change the world is to become the change we want to see in that world. And that begins today with your vocabulary. And the book of dares, which is sitting on Ted's council, as you can see in the back, is an amazing way. Honestly, every single adult should be reading this. It's not just for kids, but if you do have any children in your life, yes, it was created as a dare for young boys, but I even think young girls can read this book, because I think young girls are also programmed to believe that we're less than men. We're programmed that to get a husband, you have to be a perfect little angel and have to act in a certain way and have to speak in a certain way, and you have to be submissive to the man. And I've been told many times that the reason I'm not married yet is because I'm too independent, and this and this and that, and it's reprogrammed. Or a woman is an old maid if she doesn't get married, where a man is a stud if he doesn't get married. I mean, society just constantly is reprogramming all of these tainted social norms of what is acceptable and what's not. And men, I just want to tell you, if you have to cry, please cry. Like, I want you to feel safe to cry. I want you to feel those feelings. It's healthy to cry. And I mean, as Ted has talked about a lot of the different core principles, something he didn't really touch on is, they actually really started in the prison system. And if you think about the guys in the prison system, they're some of the toughest guys around. And to be able to go into an environment where you're dealing with a bunch of people who have been programmed to be street tough, and you're trying to tell these guys that it's okay to cry, that it's okay to feel feelings. I mean, I'm sure that you met with so many hostilities and struggles and things like that. How did you really get through to some of these guys? What are some of the core teachings in the NFL, in the NBA? Like, what do you really say to kind of wake up these men?
Actually, these men, my experience is that they're pretty much woke. We just need to stimulate in these areas. So, for example, with professional athletes, with military, with hyper-masculine occupations, business leaders, right? Corporate America business leaders. What I found is that these men are like other men in our community. They're well-meaning men wanting to live the right way, wanting to do the right thing. And so when we start peeling back the layers of manhood, they understand and identify with that perfectly, right? That they see the problems as just like I'm explaining them to you. But we have to, what I find most helpful is the storytelling and connecting the dots, that, just being a good guy is not enough. Like, that's not enough. Just caring about the women in my family, but what about the women in our community? Because it really is about what men are doing. So we have a saying in A Call to Men that Tony Porter says it at the end of his TED Talk, and I recommend this TED Talk to every man. It's on our website, acalltomen.org. GQ magazine said it was one of the top 10 TED Talks every man should see. And at the end of the TED Talk, he says the liberation of men is directly tied to the liberation of women. And when we just start connecting the shared humanity of men and women, then men get it. And when we connect them to the women in their lives, their daughters, their mothers, their sisters, their wives, their girlfriends, men get it. But that, I think, is the most important thing. So oftentimes people think about, for example, we work with professional sports leagues and, the NFL, for instance, and with domestic violence and sexual assault. And we've been working with them for about 10 years. I know for a fact that the statistics of domestic violence and sexual assault are either lower or at the same level as the general population. It's not more. Many people assume that it's more because when it happens, it's louder and bigger. And that because it is a violent sport, people think that when they come off the field, they're violent and they can't control themselves. They're just aggressive men. And that's not the case at all. These are good guys trying to do the right thing. They're about family. Many of them are very religious. They're about impacting society and youth in particular in a positive way. So they're no different than any other men. And the conversation we have with other men, all men, them included, is that we're part of the solution, that this is not an indictment on manhood, but we've all been taught some things that are harmful, that we love being men and we love boys being boys, right? Like with the book of Dares that you mentioned, it touches on all of those things so that we can prevent the harmful messages that boys get into manhood, and also the harmful things that they experience internally, and also what they do in society. For example, depression, anxiety is much higher undiagnosed among men than it is among women. Suicide is 3.5 times higher among men than it is among women. Male identified youth, suicide higher than female identified youth. Queer community is even higher as far as youth, because the man box dictates all of these things and punishes people who don't live up to it. Also, men live about 6 years less than women in the United States. All of this is connected. It's connected to telling our kids to not cry, because when they tell them not to cry, we're telling them not to feel. They don't know the difference, so they stuff it. And that emotional stress literally turns into physical stress when we get older. And in addition to that, we're taught in the man box that you're not supposed to ask for help or be vulnerable, so you don't go to the doctor when it starts to go ahead, Sarah, Dara, please.
Oh, I just exactly. A lot of my clients are actually men.
Yeah.
And first of all, they're scared to even reach out in the beginning, and they kind of tiptoe in because they're not supposed to really want help. And they'll come in with like a tarot reading, because a tarot reading is maybe a little safer than, you know, a coaching session or something like that. But of course, spirit comes right in and I'm open, so I know what they need. But it's so sad that men don't think that help, and it's something that really has to be changed. And women, we have to stop telling our young boys to man up. We have to stop telling our young boys to stop crying. Like, I've seen mothers do it to sons, and I understand that you've been programmed, and this isn't shaming you. It's not your fault, because that's what you were taught to tell your young son. But if we can just think about it a little more consciously, instead, let's say, why are you having these feelings right now? Let's express our feelings in healthy ways. Please explain to me what's going on inside of you right now that's making you have these tears. Let's ask our boys, why not? Let's ask our children why they're crying.
You hit it right on the head, and you made me think about the dares that are in the book. Right? So there are 100 dares, 100 ways for boys to be kind, bold, and brave. And they're basically in 3 buckets. They ladder up to 3 things: healthy masculinity, gender equity and inclusion, and then authenticity, being their full authentic selves, right? So if you want to play football, that's great, but you want to do theater, that's great too.
And if you want to be a dancer, then do it.
Exactly.
And if you want to wear pink tutus, it's fine, sweetheart.
Exactly. Let them be their full authentic selves. So, but to your point, one of the dares, for instance, I'll share a couple of dares with you. One of the dares is dare to share 3 emotions that you experienced today. So it's teaching boys that, oh, I can talk about my emotions, and then let me see, I have to actually identify them. So it starts to build emotional literacy. And this helps with problem solving later on, you know, because you better know yourself. There's another one.
Need this, Ted.
Yeah, well, what we're finding is that dads, after they're spending time with the book, like they're at the table later on reading it. And girls also, because again, there's only a third of them that are focused on masculinity. The others are around authenticity and gender equity. There's one that's wear your favorite female athlete's jersey to school. Right? So, and we interviewed 1,000 boys, and they loved the idea of dares. They were fascinated by it, but also terrified by it. And we really took the behavior. One of the behaviors around manhood and masculinity is that who can do more, who takes the most risk. And we took that, a risk, a dare, and turned it on its head to be 100 positive challenges. And the kids love it. We're finding that boys are asking their parents to buy an additional book they can share with their friends. And so all of these dares are focused on those 3 areas, and they're just beautiful dares. Dare to go tech free, dare to read the lyrics of songs that you like, right? To get some media literacy there. Dare to look at how women are viewed in video games. Let me see. I'll just open it up. Dare to think about songs lyrics. There we go. Dare to listen to a podcast or an audiobook about someone who's different from you.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah, there you go. There's also one, dare to prove a stereotype wrong. Dare to compliment someone every day for a week. Like everything, things like that. Dare to think about gender differently, right? So we talk about gender, right? And not how everyone identifies in a certain way. Dare to ask for consent. So even though we're not talking about sex, we're talking about boundaries. What is a healthy boundary, right? All of those things. And I'll just grab one more. I'm just turning to, there's a dare on one side and then the explanation on the other. So wherever you open it, you don't have to read it from front to back. You can just open it anywhere. Dare to write a letter to someone who inspires you, right? So you get the idea. One more. Dare to cook for someone. Right?
Oh,
There's also like dare to do something without any reward around the house, things like that.
Right. And it's just creating, I love that. Like even as when I was a teacher a million years ago, it seems like I used to have little morning meetings and go through this kind of conscious boundary setting, conscious emotional, and understanding and identifying that, because so many kids who are victims of traumas are responding to them accordingly. And so it's so important to teach from such a young age that it is okay to feel all the feels, and you're going to, and that's what is expected of you, not for you to shut it and, you know, live in this little scary box where you can't talk about anything. And so many of us, no matter the culture, no matter the religion, no matter the socioeconomic status, all feel that because we're human and we feel things, and we are normalizing, especially for male gender, that it's okay to feel. And this is what you are built to do, is feel and live and experience. But it's just, we have to reprogram all the things we've been told as, you know, a consciousness of a whole earth community. And that's the difficult part. And that's, I think, what Ted has been speaking to, is that reprogramming the consciousness.
Right. And that's important. So the reprogramming, the resocialization, however you want to call it, I like that, because what I want to make clear is that these issues that we're talking about, the beliefs, the attitudes, the behaviors, is not, it's embedded in our socialization, not in our DNA as men. Right? It's not embedded in our DNA. It's not who we are. It's what we've been taught. And so we've been misinformed, right? All of us have been misinformed about this gender, just like we've been misinformed about race, right? And the last year has exposed a lot of that misinformation. Like, whoa, really? It's like that, right? Yeah, it is. And we've seen it, but other people are now, they're being more informed about it, right? So that's a great, reprogramming is a really important thing, because we've just been taught wrong. There's nothing wrong. Nobody is bad. We've just been taught wrong things.
Right. And so just redirecting that path for people is so important. And, you know, as we spoke to, this isn't just for children. This isn't just for men. This is for everyone. This is for women too, just to go inside and to their own consciousness. And as we spoke to the authenticity, as women, to be your authentic self, you have to own, you know, as Dara and I said, things have happened to us, and that's hard to speak on. But if we are not speaking on it, we are then in turn not being our authentic selves. So, Ted, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you today. It's just a joy to see this type of work being out in the universe. And, you know, Dara having such a connection to you. She's spoken, I've known Dara, as I said, since we were 12 years old, and she has told me about you and the impact that your work has done, and how she just was so happy to volunteer for such an immensely powerful cause. So we'd love for you to stick around just a little bit longer, because what we do every week, we are of the conscious thought, as you know, and we are big on journaling, because we feel that one of the best ways to connect to your higher self is through journaling. So this week, we are going to be speaking on the modality of traumas, etc. So what I want you to think about, maybe you haven't been a victim of, you know, abuse, but everyone has their something, as I was saying. So describe an incident in your life where trauma has affected you. How old were you? What happened? Who was involved? How did it make you feel? And most importantly, how have you healed from it? Because as I spoke to, yes, some things happened to me. That was not my responsibility. But as Dara and I speak to, it is your responsibility to heal from it. So how will you heal from it? Who can you reach out to? What can you read? Who can you, speak to about it? Then I want you to think, as Ted has been speaking upon, masculinity. So a lot of us get caught up with that. What does masculinity mean to you? What does that look like to you? Is it something only men can feel? Because I will tell you, I have a lot of very masculine, strong traits that could be categorized as, masculinity. But I think there's a good place for both. And, as we've spoken on in past episodes, the yin and the yang, etc., we have to balance each other out. And being an Italian girl who was raised as an only child by a fanatical sports head father, I have learned to embrace my masculinity, and I have learned how to incorporate all those things within me being a very feminine individual. Another thing I would like you to think about is, how can you be conscious of the power of your everyday words and language and thoughts? Because as we've all spoken to, that is the first way to reprogram, is to be conscious. If you're not conscious, there's no ability to change. And if we continue with these societal norms, and over the past year, we have learned so much as a whole conscious universe of staying inside, of Black Lives Matters, of empowering our voices, and understanding that in order to change, we have to go within. The other thing I would like to speak on and ask you to go within is, how can we normalize speaking on our traumas, and in turn then normalize the process of healing? So that is what I have for you for today for our journaling. I would like to, again, thank you, Ted. And please, Ted, let us know where our audience can find you and connect with you and learn more about your cause and your newest book that came out.
Thank you. You can go to our website, acalltomen.org. Everything's right on the homepage there. You can order the book. You can also order it on Amazon, but it goes right to Amazon and Random House on the website. On IG, we are at A Call to Men. On Facebook, also at A Call to Men, and Twitter. And then I'm on IG at ted.bunch. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Ted. You are so amazing. I know that everyone's learned a lot, but it also gives people something to really think about, that a lot of people have never thought about these concepts before, because I know from just me learning from you, I had never really thought about these concepts. And through it's been over a decade that I've known you. I've literally been telling everybody that will listen about these concepts, and every single time the response is, I never thought about it that way. So thank you all today for joining us on the Soul Tribes. You can find us on thesoultribes.com, on IG and Facebook at The Soul Tribes. And of course, Amy, let them know where they can find you at, my love.
Yes, you can find me at Amy Dascola Medium on Instagram and Facebook, and you can find me at amydascola.com. And Dara, how can we find you?
And look at IG at Dara Jewet, DARAJEWETT. You can find all my websites, my Facebook, everything from there. But really make it your mission, make it your purpose to become the change that you want to see in this world. Dare yourself to step out of your box, however you've been programmed, and together let's build a more peaceful, kind world where abuse is just no longer a thing that anyone has to deal with. I know it might sound idealistic. I don't know if it will happen in our generation, but if we start planting the seeds now, it will happen. It will. So let's all become a part of the solution. Thank you so much, Ted. You're so amazing.
Thank you.